podcast. I'm your host, John Light. I'm also the CEO and founder of Sabertooth Recruiting, and today I have with me Stephanie Eidelman. And Stephanie spearheads an organization called Women in Consumer Finance. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm flattered that you asked. Thanks so much.
Well, I think it'll be a great conversation, but every great conversation, I think, has to start with some context. So, how about you give us the 90-second rundown of what you've done in your career, what's brought you to Women in Consumer Finance?
Oh, gosh. So, let's narrow this to 90 seconds. I started my career in theater. I was a stage manager, and I managed large events for Disney and Opryland, and I just loved that. But then I decided to go to business school and decided to pivot away from live entertainment because it's a pretty small world.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do, but I realized that I liked my operations classes in business school. And what really the common denominator was that I liked to be in charge. And stage management was very much just being in charge, and it was like operations, only without inventory. So I went to work at Allied Signal. It was a aerospace manufacturing company. And I did that for a while, and then the internet was starting, and I was in Los Angeles. It was the mid-90s, and I went to do operations for a startup internet company. That kind of led me in a kind of a funky way to publishing, and I learned about that industry, and I was at the epicenter of when print publishing was kicking and screaming in the process of going online. The traditional publishers did not want to do that. They didn't like it, and they thought it was a fad. And I was sort of caught up in the center of that. It was really exciting. At which point I decided I wanted to move back from Los Angeles to the East Coast where my family was, and I had been traveling full time for work. Didn't want to do that anymore. So I moved back east, and I decided I wanted to work for a small company where I could really make an impact. And it turns out my parents had a small company. They had a mergers and acquisitions firm in the Mid-Atlantic doing deals here locally, and they stumbled upon the debt collection industry as an opportunity to specialize. And back to the internet, and for them it was the late 80s when they started it, and computers were becoming a thing.
Right.
And so they saw an opportunity where there was going to be scale in that market, and so they specialized in M&A. And so when I joined the company, I didn't really get involved in the M&A stuff, but I did the behind the scenes, being in charge operationally, and they had just launched a website and a newsletter, and really as a marketing initiative. And so my job became running those and sort of all the other ancillary businesses that we started. And one thing led to another, and it became a media company, a B2B media company. And one thing led to another, and then we spun it out, and I became the owner of the media company. And as part of that, we launched in 2018 Women in Consumer Finance as a product launch for the women in the industry. It's not 90 seconds, but that's how I got to where I am today.
Well, hey, no, it's an eclectic path, though. I mean, you've been in the theater, and you've been in around M&A, and that's, I'd say that's a pretty wide gap between the two. So it's interesting to have someone on who has bridged that gap. Let me ask, when you look at Women in Consumer Finance, what's the problem you're trying to address with the organization?
Yeah. The original problem was that I looked at all the things I was involved with, which as a B2B media company and with an advocacy group, and I dealt with like the leaders of the industry. And you look around at the meetings that we had with the leaders of the industry, and it was mostly men. And there were a lot of women in the industry, but they were not at the top leading things and running the P&L businesses. And so I wanted to do something about that. And so we created this event. And so on the one hand, we wanted to solve this problem of getting women to the top. What we found is that one thing women don't have, the reason they're not at the top, is that they lack visibility. And they don't go after that visibility because they just don't feel like they belong. And so the problem that we solve with this event is that belonging, that feeling that you're not alone, and the building of a tribe, the women who have your back. And so that you have the confidence to step into those visibility opportunities. That's what we focus on.
Interesting. And I think it's really interesting in light of, me being a headhunter for 20 plus years now. I look around the marketplace and people ask all the time, what's the best way to get my next career step? And there's a process behind it. There's a lot more detail than this, but I always tell folks the most effective method you can have is to really learn to nurture, and it takes time, learn to nurture your network. And that's just not pursuing mentors, but that's also giving back. That's paying it forward. That's having a handout. That's not being afraid to give value to other people, in their endeavors. And so I think that's a pretty noble calling to go out and look at, hey, how can we lift people up through networking and advocacy and giving people a chance to, I won't say that it's necessarily inclusivity, but give people a chance to have a platform from which to build their personal brand.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because to me, where we're at as a labor market, as a job market, as an economy, my sense is we're heading to a time 10, 20, 30 years in the future where we have a lot of really big companies and we have this incredible democratization of talent, skills, and things that we do amongst individuals. I think with technology coming on, there's a great opportunity for people with a strong personal brand in specific domain knowledge areas to really raise their profile and be that expert on call, be that whatever it might be. So I think it's very intriguing. I'm curious to know, when you talk to women in the consumer finance space, what do you hear from them as being the biggest obstacle from where they are or have been that they perceive as in a way for them getting where they want to be?
Yeah, it's being visible. It's getting recognized for the things that they do. A lot of women do what I call invisible work. They do a lot of extra stuff. It does not get them noticed. They're taking the notes. They're doing the very specific execution work, and they're very good at it, and they kind of become pigeonholed there. And they don't have the bigger opportunities to step out of their comfort zone, have people champion them when they're not in the room. So those are the things that I hear. And also it's having a work situation that honors the stages of life that they're going through and feeling like they're not alone in those stages, and whether that is related to their professional stage, emerging or experienced leadership, but personal life. People go through phases of life and they have young kids, or they are taking care of parents, or whatever it is, you're getting married, or, and you need a workplace that sort of evolves with you, and a team that supports you, and a leadership that supports you. And so that's a lot of what I hear.
I think some of that is very challenging in light of the fact that 20 and 30-year career paths within individual organizations are not the norm today that they were in decades past. So I think a lot of that does come down to branding, how you're perceived, and trying to manage that forward. Having said that, I've been fortunate in my career. I have worked with and for some very bright women over the years in the financial services space and banking and advisory space around it. And there's a very high hustle factor, let me put it that way, that distinguish their careers, and very, very deep domain knowledge. There's domain knowledge of knowing the right questions to ask, and there's domain knowledge of asked and answered. If somebody asks the question, you have that deep domain knowledge, you're just right there, which takes time to develop, of course. And it's funny because you talk about stages of life. I'm very big into that, and I've read a study recently talking about job descriptions and what companies are asking for, and it talks about this diamond when they graph this one aspect of job descriptions that are placed out, job advertisements, that everybody seems to want, like 90+% of job descriptions are looking for people between 3 years and 15 years of experience. And it's created this diamond effect where everybody is swimming in the same water of what they're looking for. And to your point, overlooking or minimizing the potential positive value impact somebody who went through a stage in their life where maybe they weren't as prolific in terms of their career path, but now they've reached that space where, to your point, priorities have shifted and they're ready to go, and they bring a lot to the table. I've got a gentleman I consider a friend who is just an amazing, remarkable individual. In support of his career, he and his wife prioritized raising their kids, and she was the primary for that. But when it was time and she was like, okay, the kids are out, I kind of want to get my feet back in the game. Not in consumer finance, incidentally. I think he married up. He didn't marry a rocket scientist. He married a literal nuclear rocket scientist. When she picked her career back up, she's actually working on the Mars shot on these nuclear rocket engines to make that possible. I mean, really phenomenal that she stepped in. Kids are grown and out of the nest, so to speak, and now here she is picking up her career, not just where she left off, but I think she's already stepped up into a higher little role. I mean, she's done phenomenally. And it just drives me batty, drives me nuts to see these companies minimizing their view, intentionally or unintentionally, minimizing their view of people, and women specifically, who have more life experience and sometimes more career experience, and they're ready for that next step, and they're ready to have a big impact.
Yeah, and you know what? The life experience gives you so much emotional, EQ, right? Which is what makes for the best leaders. And it helps you, I know when I was early in my career and I was working, I was the hustle factor, that was me. And I worked a million hours. I was building my career. That's what I was focused on. I didn't have kids. I wasn't dating anybody. I didn't have a husband. And so those weren't my priorities. And I didn't really understand or appreciate when other people were. I didn't have the empathy for that. And boy, so I probably wasn't a great manager at the stage that I was when I was young. And somebody who has that life experience and can work with you, it makes all the difference. And whether any individual stays for 3 years or 5 or 15, and surprisingly, I see a lot of people still with very long tenures at companies. If they're happy, there are many people who like to stay there. Right. But the reputation of the company and the leader for being able to accommodate and work with people, that travels. And these industries are very small. Everybody knows each other, and this one moves from that company to that company, and people know where the great places to work are. They just, you hear it. And when you lose people at that really valuable stage and you need to find new people, boy, it helps to have a great reputation as a place that is good for them.
Well, it's welcoming and helps, gives people opportunity.
Yeah.
And look, some people, they reach a certain point and they don't want to do a whole lot else, but some people are highly motivated. I've had a guest on this show who is a CISO and CIO for a publicly traded company. Started off with an undergraduate, I think, in English literature, but happened to find the right mentor set and ended up going the CIO route, and has done phenomenally well. I mean, I can't even count the colloquial feathers in a hat, of all of her accomplishments that she's had over the years. Let's talk here before time starts wrapping up on us. Let's talk for a little moment about what's coming up every year with Women in Consumer Finance. And I know the website is womeninconsumerfinance.com, but I know you have an annual event. Can maybe you talk about that for a minute and what it brings for folks who want to participate?
Yeah, absolutely. So Women in Consumer Finance is an annual leadership summit. It's a 2.5-day in-person event. This year it's in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the middle of November. And it is it is truly a journey, an experience that women take together. What makes this different than just any old event where you might see inspiring speakers is that, first of all, this is designed for introverts. I'm an introvert, and the thing that I have hated the most in my career is going to an event and walking into a cocktail party and not knowing who I'm going to talk to. It feels like junior high or high school, and it's so hard. And so I designed this in the way that would make me comfortable coming to an event. And the biggest part of that is structure. And when you have structure, and you have a seat at a table, and you're introduced to people in advance. We put everyone on a team. They meet in advance. There are team leaders. There's a whole lot of structure that ensures that you are going to be taken care of, and that you are going to leave with new relationships and not just a pile of business cards. The second thing that is unique about this is, as we've sort of talked about before, we focus on belonging and not just networking. The way we do that is that we create emotional experiences intentionally, because that's what builds bonds. And we've got you for 2.5 days. We can't wait, So we create, throughout the time, we make sure to create emotional experiences so that now you have a common experience with the women that you shared this time with. And then third, we address the personal and the professional. I mentioned earlier, this is in the context of women who work in a common industry, but we don't talk about finance. We don't talk about the interest rates, or the updates on regulations or anything like that. This addresses the whole person as the woman, and we make sure we provide common spaces for women who share stages of life, common challenges. We do connect people with others who do the same type of function. If I'm in compliance or sales or that type of thing, we make it possible for you to hook up with those folks. We give you a really robust beginning of relationships with people who don't necessarily work at your company. You can do that at your company, but when you come here, your world gets bigger, and you see that you're not alone facing whatever challenges you face. And I will tell you that women go back to the office and they step up and they take on challenges that they might not have been in their comfort zone before. They start mentoring people. They start taking speaking or webinar opportunities. And all of this benefits the women, and it benefits their companies as well.
Man, okay, well, it's a mouthful, a lot of stuff. And I hope that women come out of this and also lever the network, because the experience and the bonding, I think that's smart, the structure. I think you're talking some next level stuff here. And I know people can go to womeninconsumerfinance.com and learn more, but if they want to get it direct from you, Stephanie, what's the best way for folks to find you and get in touch for a conversation?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Stephanie Eidelman, Eidelman. I'm there. You can connect with me or direct message me. Happy to have a chat with anybody.
Awesome. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah.